Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a thought experiment so incredibly radical and honestly so structurally rigorous that it completely shatters one of the most beloved fictional universes of all time. We're going to unpack a hypothetical premise for an eighth Harry Potter book, one that formulates the absolute ultimate narrative inversion. It's a really dark, completely fascinating look at how you can flip a massive story entirely on its head without actually changing a single established rule of that universe.
So here is the shocking premise of this hypothetical eighth book. What if Albus Dumbledore, the supreme force of good across all 7 books, was actually the architect of a dark, transnational exploitation network? And even more jarringly, what if Tom Riddle, Voldemort himself, wasn't the ultimate villain at all, but rather a tragically broken survivor whose entire psychological collapse was caused directly by Dumbledore's predation? I mean, just let that sink in for a second.
Okay, let's dive into this step by step. First, we'll look at the ultimate narrative inversion, then how the clues were actually there all along. Third, we'll recontextualize the villains. Fourth, the devastating public reveal. And finally, erasing a wizarding legacy. All right, part 1. The ultimate narrative inversion. So, in this reimagined timeline, Dumbledore is basically using the Order of the Phoenix as unmonitored logistical infrastructure to carry out his crimes. And to manage the non-magical side of things, the ring extends outward into the Muggle elite, utilizing real-world-style figures, think along the lines of Jeffrey Epstein, as a cross-world extension for financial backing and isolated off-the-grid properties. Now, the reason this premise really deserves rigorous examination is that it literally doesn't invent any new magic. It exploits mechanics that are already entirely canonical, but it maps them onto documented, real-world institutional abuse patterns with a precision that is, frankly, disturbing.
Moving right along to part 2. The clues were always there.
What makes this explainer so fascinating is realizing that all the puzzle pieces have always been sitting right there in front of us. The established magical rules perfectly, flawlessly support this devastating narrative shift. The absolute linchpin of Dumbledore's operation is this concept of two-stage forensic erasure. Step 1. Dumbledore physically pulls a memory out of a victim's mind and dumps it into a pensieve. Step 2. He hits them with the Obliviate charm to erase any awareness that a memory was ever taken in the first place. It is, by definition, the perfect crime. The victim is left with a mental gap that they can't even identify as a gap. And, this completely changes how we view iconic magical objects in the series. Take the pensieve. The accepted canon presents the pensieve as this helpful, slightly nostalgic tool for reflection, right? But this dark hypothesis reframes it entirely. It becomes a secure, external, forensic evidence vault. And the chilling reality here is that the Obliviate charm leaves emotional residue. Victims are stripped of their episodic memory, sure, but they retain all the behavioral trauma and the phantom feelings of whatever happened to them.
Now, what's really interesting about this is Dumbledore's unparalleled concentration of power. Look at his resume. He controls the school, the judiciary, international diplomacy, and a secret paramilitary force. When you look at real-world institutional abuse cases, they almost always feature perpetrators whose authority essentially is the institution itself. Dumbledore's positions make reportage or any kind of oversight structurally impossible within the wizarding system. Who are you going to report him to? He's the boss of everyone.
Which brings us to part 3. Recontextualizing the villains.
And this brilliantly illustrates how, if Dumbledore is the architect of this hidden horrorscape, literally every single piece of canon takes on a terrifying new meaning. Voldemort's seemingly random genocidal murders of Muggleborns, those are reframed as highly targeted decapitation strikes against the intermediaries who are managing Dumbledore's Muggle-side safehouses. Snape's inexplicable cruelty and bitterness throughout the series, that's the complex trauma of a partially memory-charmed victim dealing with intrusive thoughts. And the Order's absolute demand for secrecy, well, that provides the built-in omerta, the code of silence necessary to run a covert abuse ring.
This leads us right into Dumbledore's chilling double operational logic. He intentionally engineers Voldemort's rise to power and uses the resulting war as a massive cover-up. Whenever Voldemort attacks Dumbledore's operational nodes, Dumbledore counters by amplifying the deaths of innocent collateral, specifically pureblood families, to generate widespread public revulsion. He sacrificed innocent lives to engineer this pure evil propaganda narrative around Voldemort, positioning himself as the sole moral authority and completely, brilliantly shielding his own impunity.
Part 4. The devastating public reveal. Imagine the climax of this story.
Harry and Hermione discovering a massive vault pensive, hidden deep in an unmapped sublevel below Hogwarts, containing memory parcels from dozens of confirmed magical victims. The impact of such a reveal would be utterly uncontrollable. Within 48 hours of the story breaking, angry, disillusioned crowds dynamically destroy the Hogwarts Memorial. Within weeks, massive public campaigns strip Dumbledore's name from every award, scholarship, and institution. And within months, as the sheer scale of the complicity becomes public, the entire post-war justice system just totally fractures.
And finally, Part 5, Erasing a Wizarding Legacy.
You have to remember, Dumbledore wasn't just a beloved headmaster. His moral authority literally underpinned the entire post-war justice system. If the war's greatest hero is revealed to actually be a war criminal, then every single conviction he ever contributed to is instantly legally compromised. This discovery forces Hermione into an impossible procedural nightmare. She basically has to build a legal framework from scratch to distinguish between Order members who were active, knowing accomplices and those who were abused, memory-charmed, and recruited as completely unwitting logistical assets. How do you even begin to judge a victim who became an accomplice without ever knowing why?
To truly understand the darkest claims of this explainer, we have to anchor it back to the victims. Because the horror goes way beyond just the individuals directly involved. Imagine parents whose children were erased entirely by memory charms. The child's belongings still exist in the house, their birth record stands at the ministry, their accidental magic happened, but the parents have absolutely no accessible memory of them ever existing. The victim is reduced to a ghost. They exist in hard evidence, but they are completely erased from human experience.
The complete architecture unveiled by this thought experiment is just staggering. Dumbledore built the entire network. Grindelwald? He was an early co-architect, silenced under the guise of Dumbledore's legendary heroic duel. Voldemort was just the network's most damaged product, accurately identifying the source of the evil but then replicating that violence at an industrial scale. Both the light and the dark sides were entirely downstream of one man's crimes.
The source text describes this incredibly poignant, devastating final image for this hypothetical book. Picture this. It's dawn. A small, perfectly silent group of survivors stand before Dumbledore's marble tomb by the Black Lake. They don't destroy it. They don't speak a word. One of them simply steps forward and places a folded piece of parchment on the cold stone. It holds their returned name, finally placed somewhere it can actually be seen.
It's such a haunting image to end on, isn't it? It really asks us to look at the stories we just blindly accept, the institutions we put our trust in, and the absolutely devastating power of a controlled narrative. If the foundation of your world was built on a perfect lie, how do you ever truly begin to heal?
Well, I hope this explainer gave you a lot to think about. See you next time.